Hello, good morning. My name is Diya Prasasa. Here I am going to make a database system of Emerald Islet Resort, which is in our assignment. For this, I am choosing a Microsoft RDMS software, which is Microsoft SQL. Microsoft SQL is a RDMS software, which is built on SQL language, a standardized programming language, and is used by database administration and many IT professionals to manage the database and the query that they contain. Now opening the Visual Studio, which I have chosen to make the login page of Emerald Islet Resort. Now opening the Visual Studio 2022. Here is the login page of the Emerald Islet Resort. For this I have chosen two toolbox and two labels, where is the login button and a forget password button. To make this form, username and password is required. Click on the login button, double tap on it. Here is the code which I have written for this username and password. Here I have default using the username as Deepak and password as Deepak, where D is capital in username and all are remaining in lowercase, and in password all are remaining lowercase. Now after putting the username as Deepak and password as small Deepak and clicking on the login button, it's redirect to the page dashboard, which is given as welcome to the Emerald Islet Resort. There are 5 dashboard button. First name is guest, second is food, third one is services, fourth one is staff performance, and the last one is guest feedback. Once we click double tap on the guest, it's redirect to the page of its code, where the bottom one is for the guest, bottom 2 is for the services, bottom 3 is for the staffs, bottom 4 is for the feedback, and the last one is the feedback. Now it's redirect to the page's guest. I have taken the columns of guest detail as guest ID, guest name, email, contact, and nationality, and the 2 button. Once we double tap on the add button, there is the code that I have written for the add bottom of guest. This is the code where I have used guest ID, which is int, primary int, and next one is guest name, which is varchar, email, which is varchar, contact number, which is also varchar, nationality also varchar, and these are the commands line which I have used. And next bottom is view details, and the codes are here. These are the codes. Now the next is food, which is the second of dashboard. Now click on the foods design. This is the food detail that I have made for the Emerald Islet Resort, and the columns names are food ID, food name, type, and the guest ID, which is the primary key that make a relation to the guest. Once we double tap on the add button, it's redirect to the page of code. Here is the code that I have written for the food page, and the columns that I have taken are food ID, food name types, and the guest ID, where food ID is the primary key and the guest ID is the foreign key. And the next bottom is view details, and these are the codes related to it. And similarly for the third, which is services, now click on this, go to the services design. Here is the service detail, where I have chosen the columns names respectively as service ID, service name, guest ID, where service ID is the primary key and the guest ID is the foreign key. Now clicking double tap on the add button, here are the key, and these are the codes that I have written. Similarly for the second button, which is view details, and these are the codes for the button add view. Now the fourth one is staff performance. Now clicking on the staff design, which is here. Here I have taken three columns: staff ID, staff name, and service ID, where staff ID is the primary key, and service ID is the foreign key. Double tap on the add button. Here is the key related to it, and similarly clicking on the next view button, here is the codes for the button view. And last one is feedback design. Here is the feedback design, where I have taken three columns, namely as feedback ID, food ID, and service ID, where feedback ID is the primary key and the food and service ID are the foreign key. Similarly, there are two buttons, namely add and view details. Clicking double tap on the add, it's redirect to the page of codes. Here are the codes. Similarly for the view details, double click on it. Here are the codes for the view button. Once we put the data on it, it's redirect to the page of details. Now play the forms. After clicking the start button, it is asking to us to fill the username and password. Now I am writing Deepak, where D is capital, and password Deepak, where all are small. Once we write correct password or username, a pop-up will appear in which it will say incorrect username and password. For example, look here, incorrect username and password is pop-up. Click on the OK button and write the correct password. Click on the login button. It will redirect to the page dashboard, in which there are 5 buttons. First one is guest. Click on the guest button. It will redirect to the page of guest detail, where there are 5 columns. For example, if we write a name and ID, email, number, and nationality of a particular guest, and then add it, we will see by clicking on the view button. Let's see an example. Suppose we write a guest ID as 50, 59, guest name as Rahul, email as rahul59@gmail.com, contact number is 1234, and nationality is Nepali. And we hit the button add. Here is the data added pop-up is shown. Now click on the OK button and let's see view details. I have already added a list of 5 guests which is given here. Now click on the view detail. Here are the list of peoples, namely as Deepak, Ram, and here are the list: guest ID, guest name, email, contact name, and the nationality. And the last I have added in the example, which is Rahul. Now close this guest form, and next one is food. Click on the food button. There are the columns: name, food ID, food name, type, guest ID. Once you put the data on it, click on the add. Then we see the view details of food items. I have already listed the 5 items which is here. Now click on the view details. Here are the list of food ID, food name, type, guest ID, which is the foreign key that links to the tables, and this is the primary key, which is food ID. Now close the foods, and third one is services. Click on the services. Here are 3 columns, namely service ID, service name, guest ID. Add the details here and click on the add. Similarly, add the details here and click on the add. It will take the data, and once the data is added, we click on the view details. I have already listed the data of 5 members which is given here. Now click on the view details. Here are the service ID, which is the primary key of service details, guest ID, which is a foreign key, and the service name. Now close these services, and the fourth one is staff performance. Click on the staff performance. Here the detail of the staff, where staff ID, staff name, and the service ID are given. Once we put the data on it, click on the add button. After adding the data, we click on the view details. After clicking the view details, we'll see the data that we have listed or added. Here are the columns: name, staff ID, staff name, which is a staff ID is a primary key, where service ID is a foreign key that links the data to it. Now closing this staff detail dialog, and staffs 2, and last one is guest feedback. Here there are 3 columns, namely feedback ID, food ID, and the service ID. Once we put the data on it, clicking on the add button, and after the data is filled, click on the view details to see the data. Here the data are feedback ID, food ID, and the last one is service ID. I have added list of 5 peoples where feedback ID is namely 60, 61 to 64. Now close this. Now go to the Visual Server. Click on the stop debugging. Now it is the time to connect the SQL server. Now go to the SQL. Here is the name of the server of my PC. Now copy this. Go to the Microsoft Visual Studio. Click on the tools. Click on the connect server. Here we change from Microsoft SQL Server database file to Microsoft SQL Server. Click on the OK button. Here is the server name. Now we have to copy the server name and paste it here. We leave the authentication as it is. Click on the server trust server certificate. Go to the SQL server. Once we create the database, here I am creating resort 1. It will comes in databases. Drop down this and we'll see where it is. Here the resort 1 is. Now click on this. Go to the Microsoft SQL. Click on the connect to a database. Drop down this and select resort 1 and then click on the OK button. Once we have clicked on the OK button, the data server is connected. As we can see here, the desktop LIJKD6J, which is the server of my PC, which is connected to the SQL server here. And we have created a database in this way. Here I have created a database, namely resort 1, in which I have listed some of the tables, namely as dashboard, feedback, foods, guest, login page, services and steps. To see this, the data of guest, click on the guest, drop down this, click on the columns. Here are the columns name, guest ID, which is the primary key, guest name, email, contact number, nationality. If you want to see the data of this table, right click on this guest, go to the select of 1000 rows. You will see the data that we have added in Visual Studio Server. Here is the list of the data. We can also use the query method to see the data as select @from guest and select this and execute this. We can see the list of the data of table guest. Similarly, we can also see the same data by using Visual Studio. Click on the Visual Studio, go to the Server Explorer, click on the tables, go to the guest, and here is the list of the columns. Similarly, if we see the data of that columns, click on the guest, right click on it and view the show table data. It will see the data of that column. Now close this. Similarly, if you want to see the data of foods, click on the foods, right click on it and then show data table. It will see the data of food table. Now close this. To edit the toolbox and button, we use a properties named toolbox. We can also add the toolbox by right click on the page go to the properties. Here the toolbox appears in the right side. There are several properties here which helps to edit the forms. Next one is toolbox. For this we go to the view button, click on the toolbox. Here are the toolbox which is used to make the forms. Now close this properties dialog. And there is the backend properties of this form is, once the data is added using the Microsoft SQL Server, can go to the toolbox where we use a property named data grid views, in which the data are shown that we have added. For this, for example, I have made a grid button for guest, which is a guest detail design. Here I have made. Double click on this. Here is the code that I have written for the grid bottom of guest detail. Similarly, for all the dashboards button like guest, food, services, staff performance, guest feedback, there are 5 buttons. Individuals needs a data grid views tables. So let us see an example. I have chosen guest. For this I have made a guest detail design, which is here, in which the columns names are guest ID, guest name, email, contact number and nationality. Double click on this. Here are the codes for the data grid view, and this is the code for the to render the data on the screen. Similarly, for all the buttons like food and services, these are the forms that I have made. This for the feedback forms, this for the staff, this for the services, and this for the foods. In this way I have made a form for the Emerald Ashley Resort. Thank you.